Hello and welcome. My name is Marc Risby. I'm MD and CTO of DigiBox. I'm really happy to say hello and introduce Bryce Button from AJA, here, Director of Product Marketing, who's joining us in the UK for a couple of days.
Yes, great to be here. Wonderful to sit down with you again.
Great to have you. So NAB, it's just over, and we've been talking about what came out of NAB and what was new. It was kind of difficult to get a theme in a way. It was a kind of weird show, getting back to in-person events again. But I guess two things that came out of it for me were IP video, where we're going, I guess, real-world IP video. What does that mean now, and where are we going? And I guess the coming of age of streaming. I know we've had streaming for a long while in one way or another, but it's found a complete new audience, loads of new places to use it. Post-COVID, I think we're kind of really appreciating what we can do over the public internet. And what products are out there to help us in that world, and I know you've picked a few to showcase today.
Absolutely.
So maybe we can kick off, talk a little bit about NDI, the little IP standard that could. It's been around about 6 years, but I think it's found a whole new audience recently as it's kind of moved up the tiers to the higher end broadcasters, and people are looking for better ways of using it and more robust ways of using it, in a broadcast domain. So what's happening there for you?
Yeah, so, NDI is becoming prevalent in a range of arenas, everything from education to broadcast environments, especially when you've got smaller affiliates that are trying to move stuff around over IP, and the fact that everyone's looking at how do I get my stuff over the web as well, so OTT workflows, that type of thing. And there's a great mass of products out there at this point. We're talking thousands of products have entered the market. So as we looked at NDI, we kind of went, all right, what's AJA really great at? And we tend to be really good at dealing with transforming between protocols, between standards, between transport mechanisms. So that meant bridge NDI 3G. And what this is it's a really high density box, single rack unit in terms of its dimensions. So very easy to put in the rack alongside your other equipment. And it's a gateway between SDI and NDI in both directions. So you've got the capability of bringing in a range of equipment. We're sitting here looking at NDI cameras today. There would be some of your sources, for instance. And we really found that it has become extremely popular very fast. So we needed to do some updates. NDI 5 has come along. We wanted to offer support, and we'll talk about that in a little more detail because we're giving you a lot of flexibility with that. Discovery server compatibility, whether you're dealing with Mac OS, Windows, Linux. New buffering latency controls. There are a lot of devices out there in the NDI world. Sometimes they don't perform particularly well in terms of the video-audio relationship.
They do not. No, it's nice thing about NDI is quite a controlled ecosystem in a way because it comes from one vendor.
Yep.
So actually interoperability is normally pretty good.
Right.
But I think with NDI 5, what we're seeing is understanding what it's like in a bigger world. So Discovery Server lets you, deal with a much bigger network and make that easier.
Yep.
And the buffering really shows you where there are differences between manufacturers and vendors. We can tweak it a little bit more. So it's a coming of age thing, I think.
Oh, completely. It's maturing it out. And, the last item on the list, as you can see here, is timecode support. Especially for devices that might have come out of more of the AV world where no one really was paying attention to that. But if you're trying to move into an environment where you might be coming from NDI sources, you want to take it back to baseband, you want to record it, you're going to want sync timecode to work with, that type of thing. So it's really pretty great. In terms of starting out here with the new NDI 5 support, this also now means we include NDI HX 1, 2, and 3, which of course expands essentially your codec choices here.
That's quite unusual. I haven't seen many things that support more than one flavor, if at all. So.
Yeah, and because we know we're going to be dealing with a wide range.
So if people aren't sure of HX, what does that compare to full NDI?
So in terms of it, it's more flexible in terms of your codec choices here, giving you a range of sort of compression settings essentially.
So I think when you get to HX3, I think full NDI you're looking about 220 megabit for 4K and HX3 about 80 megabit, so it's significantly smaller payload, but They've tweaked the latency quite a lot, haven't they? I believe HX3 is pretty good.
Yeah, it's really darn good. And in terms of moving to the 5 support, you'll see in the slide here that we're trying to be pragmatic for people. A lot of folks are going to have NDI 4 versions out there that are really stable for the current pipelines they're set up. And so on occasion, you're going to want to work in 4. On occasion, you're going to want to work in 5. So it's your choice. And when you apply that, it's basically sort of a soft reboot of the software to get you into the environment, so you don't have to worry about, as any new standard comes along, you might be running into incompatibilities you weren't quite expecting. So this will keep your pipelines and your workflows very stable. As we talked about a moment ago, the service support here on Windows means, new tech NDI discovery service. On Linux, it's NDI directory service, and then of course on Mac.NDI directory service. So the whole point there with discovery and across the IP world, this is a big item, because what you're trying to do is you're trying to manage and understand where on networks your various choices are, and then ensure that you're able to find them simply enough, because there's, for those of us that have come from the SDI world, was basically, have you got the BNC on the right, connector kind of thing, right?
I think the thing here as well is that if you're looking at 2110, where discovery services weren't part of the actual original, specification in itself, it's a standalone thing that runs alongside it.
Yep.
Discovery services are built into the way NDI works at the core level. So, it makes that a little bit easier in setup, because it's, it's just there, right? It's just there. And discovery includes capabilities as well. So the device says, I am this type of device, so it saves a lot of that early setup where you'd have to go through and manually put that otherwise.
Oh, absolutely. So, wherever we can do simplicity. Buffering and latency. So this is an interesting one. We're looking for ultimate performance based upon your network conditions, with concurrent video processing going on and so on. So the way we've designed this box is that we've ensured that all priority is given to the actual signal workflows. So this buffering and latency can help you here in terms of the GUI. So if you're finding that you're pretty close to overloading the network here, you can bring the buffering down so that you ensure you've got easy and fast access to the interface still, and the interface is not actually putting more strain on the network than you'd like. When you've got a little more space available, of course you can up that buffer. Within the timecode support, this is extensive. We're taking all the embedded timecodes you're going to be used to from SDI. So VITC 1, 2, LTC, longitudinal timecode, going all the way back to my early tape days, right? Still exists, time of day, and UTC in local time zones. And so that gives you, practical time zones that you can set, especially if you're working between different environments physically. That'll keep you in check. So the great thing with this is it's all free and available today. So it's a firmware update. I recommend you hit the website if you already have a bridge NDI in your facility, and ensure you get up to this latest version, because there's always this a range of tiny tweaks that we do all over the place with every release,
I've been really impressed at how quickly NDI 5 has rolled out. Some new things take a while, but we've got a lot of users on a lot of products, and it really has hit them all quite quickly. So it's nice to see that. And I guess it's an evolution. It's got some quite special features. It's still an evolution. So we are, version 5, right? So, so 6 years worth of, they've got pretty good at doing that now. So brilliant. Which brings us on, thank you for that, to Bridge Live, star of the show from our recent MPTS show in London. Great to be back to in-person events again. And, so many people wanting to look at it. I think this has come out of, post-COVID, streaming has really, upped its game. There's more money in streaming. There are more outputs available. And I think professional broadcast type users are working out, a way of streaming in a broadcast manner, like it is any other signal. We want to look after it and treat it well. And it's a very varied world. You never know what stream type you're going to need to make. And Bridge Live has already become the Swiss Army knife go-to encoder. So you've been developing it further. So what else is happening?
Absolutely. You know, Bridge Life, as Marc is sharing here, has been a really strong solution for us to be able to put into the market. And, you know, recently we've gone through transitions where it's no longer just the typical streaming protocols. Includes NDI now as well, and of course SDI. So, you know, you're capable of working with Ultra HD as well as HD multi-channel, and being able to move between all of these. And I think another great addition that's really worked in the market here was our initial foray into the SRT alliance.
For sure.
And making sure that our professional customers, you know, essentially live in the broadcast space, everyone cares about the intellectual property, and being able to work with that safely across the public internet, because that's really the boon here, right, is utilizing something that's freely available to do your transport. So just, you know, recap in terms of what's possible here. It's a 12G box, which means, of course, it's backwards compatible with 3G SDI. You have the NDI, encode and decodes. You got H.265, otherwise known as HEVC, high efficiency video codec, H.264, H.262. You're going to have a wide range of needs in terms of your compression settings, etc. JPEG 2000 is in red this, and because it's an optional codec, this is going to be your highest quality. And in many ways, you'll see in some of the diagrams coming up, that is a way of being able to literally do what we call, you know, backhauling.
Or contribution
encoding. And may mean you can save significant dollars when it comes to other options that people have been used to for years, satellite, etc.
I think that's where one of the things that it's really important to hammer home with Bridge Live, actually, and a lot of people miss it. I called it a streaming server. You know, that is just part of it. You know, streaming and contribution in one box, encode and decode, means if you have a pair of those, you know, perhaps in your facility, in your truck, and in your HQ, you can do just about anything with that. It's very, very multi-purpose. Whereas most things are a streaming encoder, a contribution encoder, and probably an encoder or a decoder.
Correct.
Totally flexible.
No, the flexibility is immense. And as you can see, you know, even put in things like HLS for Apple devices. You got your RTMPS, VSF, for instance, MPEG transport streams. We're trying to make it as flexible as possible for you to deal with almost any scenario and ensure that you're getting correctly from one place to another. So in terms of the updates that we're coming out with, and this particular update will be available soon, one of the big things we wanted to sort was synchronous multi-channel transport. So what we're talking about there is you may have 4 camera sources. They could be NDI cameras, they could be SDI. And the key thing there was, as long as you've got Genlock going in the source environment, through the public internet, we're going to keep that in sync for you. And that's a pretty big deal. Because you might be, as you mentioned, having a second box on the reception end, and you can literally throw that up into your live router back at your master control room. And then you're going to be able to switch cleanly, even though your source is God knows how many hundreds of miles away, and then move that through. The second thing we've been able to do is bump up the Ultra HD support, so it's now dual channel.
Wow, okay.
Which is great. And then HDR, over all of this. You know, high dynamic range has definitely grown, and I think we've proven at this point that even in the HD environment, that HDR addition is a huge add.
I think especially in the HD environment, it's one of my takeaways from NAB as well, was HDR with HD rather than 4K for a lot of people is becoming, actually, that's a really good option. It looks fantastic.
It looks great, you know, and, you know, for many home environments, depending on your screen size, etc., the level of detail that you gain through HDR is much like a 4K experience, you know. In fact, a lot of folks can't really tell in terms of true perception. So it's been very exciting. So here we're looking at the boxes in terms of that multi-channel synchronous support. So it's really key to understand that this is not only going to help you just for SDI to SDI, where you've used a codec to get across, the public internet. Even if you're going into a cloud service, as we'll see in one of these diagrams, you're going to be able to keep all of that in sync. So here's a basic diagram in terms of you've got your remote sources. As long as you've gen-locked it coming in, then at the media facility or data center, you're getting it back. And as I mentioned, you're likely going to put that into a switcher or maybe into multiple recorders, right? Then everything's going to stay in sync. Your time code is going to keep you accurate and the rest of it. But you could be going to the cloud. So if you've got the second box sitting there picking this up, going to the codec of your choice, that you're trying to bump into AWS or any of these major cloud services. But with AWS, you've got some practical, software that's helping you take care of stuff, which is Media Connect and then into Media Live. And then that can be a live switch off the cloud. So again, it's all the flexibility we've been talking about. With the Ultra HD, the dual channel, so it's a second channel for input and output, just giving you a lot more capability in the same box.
This is something that's fascinating, really, because a lot of old broadcast people, we're not used to suddenly having a hardware box that generates another channel, right?
Yep.
That doesn't happen.
Yep.
But this is software. And, you've got a lot of processing power within the bridge,
Exactly.
There's a lot there. And as the software gets more efficient and as you learn how the product works, it's a bit like your Tesla getting extra range. Once they've had it for a year, they've worked out they can do this more efficiently.
That's right.
You get another channel. I mean, it's quite amazing, really.
No, it's a lot of fun, for any of the folks that have experienced our Kona cards over the years. It's not atypical at all for our Kona cards, for instance, over their lifespan to get up to something like 70 to 100 updates through the course of their lives. And, Kona 3G was always a great example where it kind of was initially HD and then it was incredibly 3D and then it was suddenly 4K. We try to plan ahead, and then as we learn more about technologies and our ability to implement them in a way that we're comfortable with, in other words, it has to work, It has to be reliable. That's part of the AJA brand, right? We're never going to leave you in a hole.
Well, I find, I've got a Honda electric car and it's never had an update. Where I'm jealous now because I've watched everyone else with their EVs getting updates and getting new features. My car is still very as it was when I bought it, and I feel cheated by that in my in my product outside there. So it's funny how you do move on, right?
Yeah. So let's move on to
the Helo.
Right.
So this was new at NAB, building on the back of the Helo product, the encoder, the streaming encoder. I think I can call that a streaming encoder.
Yep.
But the Helo Plus is all new. I guess I can be the QVC model for you on this case. Here we go.
Yeah, this is our new puppy. Very, very happy with it. The original Helo all the way through COVID. Especially, it was popular prior, but that really jacked it up because everything from schools to corporations to hospitals to all sorts of environments realized, well, we still need to communicate with each other, right? And how do I do that simply? Houses of worship, for instance, we had a lot of members of the church that either were going to be vulnerable if they were exposed, or simply we also have aging populations in much of the West. The ability to keep reaching people really got jacked up. So it accelerated something that was already in motion. So in terms of key features that we brought to this implementation of the Helo Plus, it begins with 2 encoders, which, as you'll see in a moment, is going to give you a ton of new flexibility and options, supporting up to 1080p 60, which of course means here in Europe up through 50. Robust graphics capability. We're giving you 2 inputs here, 3G SDI and HDMI, and they can be used simultaneously. And it's still a standalone device. You do still have a web server essentially built in, which allows you to deal with the UI control and configuration and a bunch of extra features.
So the standalone, one of the cool things about Helo is that you can preset this, ship it out in a box. The person plugs it in, presses a button,
off you go.
And off you go. There's no further config required. I think, especially during the COVID, thing, that was so useful because, people were given toolkits effectively to go out who'd never used this stuff before. And that's a very cool feature that's almost, missed by some people, but I just love that.
No, it's really practical. A lot of these environments we're talking about, you often got AV staff that are essentially volunteers. They might work, day to day in a broadcast environment, and then they're asked to help out with events in their particular areas of love, live events where you
unpaid events,
unpaid events, exactly. All these kind of environments. So that flexibility is huge. And as you can see, we're covering a ton of the protocols again: RTMP, HLS, UDP, the whole lot. It is an H.264 device. Often people go, "Why are you not doing HEVC?" Well, H.264 still has some major advantages. One of them is if you're dealing with HEVC, it's progressive only. And when you're dealing with a world that's still got a lot of interlace going on, this is your more flexible codec. Moving to the delivery systems, as you can see, it's everything: Facebook Live, YouTube, Amazon, Twitch, Akamai. It goes on and on and on. You're going to have your own CDNs on occasion. So you can go wherever you need to go. And in terms of looking at the front, very pleased to say we've added audio level meters. This is a big one. It just gives you that self-confidence when you're actually going through the live event that you're seeing channels correctly go through. Because, when those lights go out, you may need to double-check something in a hurry. As Marc mentioned here, direct record and stream button. Click and go. So as long as you've done your preset, you're ready to fly. USB storage, you might be sticking in either a little flash drive or an entire drive if you need to, if you're doing really long events. SD card slots. Apple's kindly put some of those slots back on the laptops.
Thank God.
Easy transfer, right? And of course, power status, so you know what's going on. On the rear, you've got your two audio channels, the 3G SDI and the 3G SDI out. So this can be in a normal chain. Maybe you've got a camera going on, or you've run things through a switcher. You want to record it high quality. There might be an AJ Key Pro sitting there to get you the ProRes files. HDMI in and out, of course, and the 1 gig LAN that's connecting you to the world, both for delivering, these streams, and of course for the configuration and control through the GUI. As you'll see, we now have a lovely locking connector.
We love a locking connector.
We love a locking connector for sure. This is just to ensure, it's metal, it's solid. The idea here is live is kind of crucial. You don't get to do it again. And we wanted to make sure that our users were feeling ever more confident about where they could deploy and ensuring they got that feeling of stability as you go through an event that you're never going to get to do again. So compact and field-proven design. It's really light,
I think the physical characteristics of Helo and the Plus particularly, a lot of people just threw stuff on a laptop. Free software, lots of converters getting in and out of it, and it sort of works. Where this really, holds its own is it's a proper bit of kit. It's small and easy to use, but there's no operating system involved in it. There's no Windows. Nothing's going to sit there trying to update. It is an appliance to do a job, which is an important job now. So I think,
absolutely,
no one's going to get a virus on it.
No, and that's a key point, for folks in the field. Of course, when you're wanting to do remote control of such a device, the fact that it's on the LAN and you can get into that web browser GUI,
brilliant,
make all your configurations, it's wonderful. And you can, of course, save and move around when it comes to your presets. So if you set up for a particular project and you're going to deploy that in multiple locations, easy to share. So you can see in the basic interface here, you effectively have, that's a confidence monitor. We're not giving you, we're always sacrifice the frame rates within what you're seeing there to ensure that your actual streams, actual recordings, and of course you're streaming and recording.
But you see something, which is all you need most of the time, right?
You just want to make sure you're good. And easy sliders and drop-down menu choices. So there's your preview window, as I mentioned, complete control and configuration. And with this interface now, and dealing with the dual streams, right? You could be dealing with SDI source and HDMI source, literally doing two completely separate streams at a time with different bit rates, formats, and destinations. But once you've got these two, to me, the fun becomes here you've gone to your various, outputs, so to speak. So different examples you're looking at there, two destinations, RTMP alongside SRT, etc., and so on, and dual streaming and recording, so you can record both streams exactly at the same time, a little bit like our KeyPro Go, which does up to 4 channels of that. Here you then have a simple streaming example. A lot of people are going to come off a video switcher where they might have done some intense graphics, that type of thing, getting the program out. You've got your HDMI monitoring, you've got your headphones, of course, and you've got your stream heading back out the door. As we get into something like education, and it's one of the reasons we have that HDMI input, you're often going to have presentations, etc., coming off a laptop. And we're finding that corporations are wanting to do that kind of thing, right? So you can have the talking head, in this case being my fugly face, and that could be sitting there alongside the actual, prezzo going on. So this has become huge within education, and then taking that source, that single source here, from those two inputs, now you could be doing two outputs, right? Because you've got two encoded streams. One might be going HLS, because then you're on, for instance, a campus-wide kind of iPads, those types of devices for the students, and as well as sending it to a stream destination.
Well, this also gives you options going back to sort of learning management systems and those type of products that often are looking for a cheap, valued encoder that works at a high enough quality that's simple to use. This fits that world beautifully.
No, I think it entirely does. Here for sports, for instance, just a different example again, you might be choosing to send through different protocols. So a lot of flexibility as you make your choices. And now, to me, is when it gets fun. Because what we're effectively able to give you here is a second stage. The original Helo was kind of set and forget, right? You get your stream set up, you've chosen all your configurations, you hit the record or stream button and sort of leave it alone. Now that we have the ability to bring graphics and layouts and you're dealing with two sources, you're going to want to combine it all. So what you essentially have going on here is effectively almost a built-in switch type capability. So you've got the dual channel streaming. You can now import graphics. You can scale those video sources, as you've seen with this image. You can then save your own user-defined layouts. So I call this the design phase. So you've done all your configuration, you know what you're going to do. You're now going to go into phase 2, where you're going to, this is prior to the event itself, figure out your designs and layouts and actually save them. And you can name them in English in a manner that works for you. So you know that this is your main title, here's my lower third, whatever it's going to be, which gives you up to 99 sources that you could be bringing in as you look at this, right? So you create your images within Photoshop, whatever your favorite graphics app is, and then you're putting it all together in these layouts. So here you get a look at what that is. You've actually got a layout view, so you can sort of scale these things, know where they're going to sit on screen for you. You can turn layers on or off however you need to, and configure those all correctly. So you can bring in up to 99 items, which is quite a lot. And then within a group of layouts, right? So you might be doing 2 different shows. You might have 2 different classrooms. One topic's history, the next topic is math, next social studies, whatever it might be. And you have brought in all your graphics, you've saved them into your library, and then you save those sets of layouts basically into 10 layouts at a time. So when you actually get to live day, you effectively have what we call a shot box, which a lot of people will be used to, from switches and those kind of settings. So that gives you the quick recall on the day of live, and all you're having to do is click
Bang,
any
bang,
one of your
bang,
10
bang.
options, and you've named it the way, that works in a manner that works for you. And those kind of items can again be shared between multiple units. So as you go into the field or as you have offices across the nation or internationally, all that work can be done by your design team, can be saved and deployed very simply and easily.
You can really see. I was thinking about how much this might get used at a live event where you've got, like a conference where you've got screens all the way around, run off a simple decoder. And here you could be showing the output of a conference room or the output, and then lunch is coming up, and then without using anything else all built into the one box. I mean, it's incredibly powerful.
No, it's so pragmatic for a range of environments. And as I mentioned, this is working for broadcasters for their OTT programming. It's working for colleges. It's working for houses of worship. And we're seeing way more commercial companies today going, okay, this is our main means of communication, partially to our retailers, for instance. So if you're a distribution group, but also within companies themselves, dealing with stuff that's, different time zones as you have multiple offices. And all of this is secure. It's as opposed to the original Helo. With this box, we've been able to add the SRT support. And SRT, it means you're getting encryption, right? It stands for Secure Reliable Transport. It tends to deal with latency better as well. So latency and security really are two of the key items with this protocol.
So security-wise, that's a 256 AES encryption, which is a bank-level encryption. That's the method I've always says if it's good enough for my online transaction, it's good enough for my video. And studios are totally happy with it and cool with it. And the latency issue, I guess you're dealing with different types of latency. You're dealing with the network latency, jitter and things that you might get on a long public internet, or perhaps if you're going between London and Sydney, there is a long ping time, which is always a massive issue, and it's dealing with that kind of thing too. It's a very, very flexible protocol.
It's bringing everything into sync, and ensuring that you got reliable streams. And that's really what everyone's looking for. Nothing's more annoying than a stream that's lacking reliability. So bringing that over, now when we talk about bringing two products together, so here you got Helo Plus and you're seeing Bridge Live, your Helo Plus now becomes an encoding source that you're then transferring safely again via SRT through the cloud, can come back into Bridge Live, right, and can be one of multiple sources you have going on across the planet.
Now, this is what I wanted at the beginning of lockdown.
Right.
So, the concept here where you've got, perhaps I could send out a Helo Plus to a journalist who's now at home, who would have been a presenter in a studio. They can plug their normal camera in it, use a light. I press one button and it dials home and connects to my Bridge Live in the studio and does the decode.
Yep.
How much time would that have saved us all?
It saves a ton of time. And, if you're a fan of baseband, you want to go back into the router, as you're seeing with the Kumo here, then we're doing that decode again for you and getting into a really clean baseband signal that, again, can be routed all over the place, back into switches, back into recorders. So the flexibility of this kind of combination is actually pretty stunning. Our product manager on this end is Steve. I said to him, every time you go add these things, now you've got an H.264 full source that's going into the device that can also be dealing with the NDI sources. It's a sort of logarithmic scaling of what you can deal with, which I think is just fabulous.
It is amazing. And I think this gives a lot of confidence to existing broadcast people.
Yep.
There's still, an old school attitude and people want to be belt and braces all of the time. I think this de-risks a lot of that.
Yes.
SDI, there's still a lot of love for it. We still have more people wanting to buy 12 gig routers than we can sell them quick enough for. So, I know that demand's out there, and the truck guys, again, still in that world. So being able to come up with a sort of hybrid, I think, for people who aren't ready to go full IP end to end, this ticks a lot of boxes.
And it gets you there simply, So here's an environment, for instance, where you may be dealing with the remote workflows that, despite COVID hopefully tapering off, shows you how your creatives, can really truly work in a remote fashion. You got a basic example here of a workstation that could be, big HP box. It could be a little Mac laptop. The IO 4K Plus is already a Thunderbolt device that's going to work really gracefully there. And then getting that SDI signal into the Helo Plus literally means you could be editing here in London and you got remote clients sitting in New York. They might be your agency, they might be your producer.
I don't think this is going to go away post-COVID.
Oh, no. I think this is actually...
People have changed how they work.
That's right. And there's a lot of preferences. Companies are figuring out right now how do we make this sort of result of COVID function going forward. And sometimes it's great to be all working together in a facility. Others might go, you know what, I've become more productive and I would like to continue working from home. So there's a lot of choice, and this kind of remote capability is going to make it simple to move forward. So now we come to something really interesting but unique with the Helo devices. The ability to actually use a good old-fashioned calendar.
Calendar. They might take off.
Yeah. I mean, it's once you've done an initial show, for instance, especially if you're a corporate environment and you're looking at all those multiple offices, the chances are they're going to sit there in different time zones, right? Or you've got a regular service at a church and it's going to be every Sunday at. This way, you can basically trigger the live streaming off a calendar ICS file. So you simply go in, as you can see here, and say, hey, I'm enabling the scheduler. I want it to do both recording and streaming at the same time. And this is going to trigger every preset that you put into the device.
Very cool.
So it gives you a lot of flexibility. And the great thing with our GUIs, by the way, is it's a single web page. So you can always have multiple tabs open. Maybe you got multiple Helo Pluses. Maybe you're combining it with your recorders. Mm-hmm. And those are simply tab by tab by tab in your web browser.
Brilliant.
So really simple to work with. Group control. So this is fun. We brought up the Key Pros a few times. The wonderful thing here now means that we can do a single push, so a Helo Plus or a Key Pro can function as a leader, and as long as you group them all, they'll all trigger start, stop, record, and streaming now at the same time. So if you set up a system where, you're wanting high-quality ProRes files for final edits, you're very happy with H.264 that you can hand off immediately after the event to someone, especially, for instance, we do a lot of live concerts, and the bands literally walk off
with a card,
with a USB stick, and they head back to the hotel, get a couple of drinks, double-check the performance for the night, off you go. This just means you can have a single operator now. Mm. So you can cut back on staff, or at least you can take the worry out of it as you're dealing with triggers for multiple devices. So for here, for instance, you might be using the KeyPro Ultra 12G as the leader, and the Helo Plus is just going to take its cue from there.
Brilliant.
So as soon as you hit record on KeyPro Ultra, off it goes.
And people love a big red record button, right?
Oh, yeah.
It's still the best way to make anything start. So I think it brings that sort of analog feel back in.
Oh, it does. And, that's that sense of security again. You might have multiples going on here. For instance, this is a pretty good example of the key video might be the same, but we need different languages going on, translations, sporting events.
We're seeing translations in the corporate world go significantly through the roof. A lot of companies are now saying every event we do has to at least have a simultaneous, closed caption, but also I am going to do this in 2 other languages or 3 other languages. And that's what the corporates weren't really looking at 2 years ago even, but now it's become an absolute. So.
Yeah, which is great. So all you'd be doing here is using different, audio inputs per Helo Plus device. You've got your key video that's come off the switcher, and off you go again. So much flexibility. And one of the greatest things about the Helo Plus here is the fact that it's quiet. You'll notice that we've taken it to a darker black. That's a reflection of the fact that we are seeing these on more and more on set.
I thought that was a goth edition. That's actually deliberate.
It's deliberate. And, that just helps with reflections on set, that kind of thing. But it needs to be quiet. It needs to be fanless. For live events, again, you just don't need to add extra
sport
noise.
Particularly. I've had a few sport applications where there's a 0 fan requirement if it's courtside or whatever. So that makes total sense. Yeah, brilliant.
So it's all part of the pragmatic stuff. So who needs it? Well, frankly, everyone. But, we can see here some examples of remote work we talked about a lot today, live events. They're all over live events. We've seen them utilized a lot within government scenarios. So what that might be is your city council, so the public, who they are responsible to, can actually watch particular sessions, post-production, as we mentioned, and broadcast. But broadcast today is a expanded thing. You're going to have your live linear TV feed, but almost every major channel has got that going, plus, yeah. And that plus is, a wide range of streams on the internet.
I think the other thing here is that a lot of these people who aren't what you might consider our core market are very much our customers now.
Yes.
But also a lot of them tried to make do during COVID. They cobbled things together. Now we're out of that and we're going to business as usual, or the new business as usual, or whatever we're going to call it. It's about perhaps trying to harden those systems, make them work better, because we're going to keep them. So I don't want 15 computers together. I want to make this using hardware appliances and know that that's how I'm going to do it. I want to know there's someone on the end of the phone, who can support me, because now this is my prime time. I'm doing most of my sales conferences this way instead of in person. That's what my company has said it's going to do. So I need to take it very seriously. And I think we're finding that that's the growth part of the market for us as these people become bigger deals.
Completely. And the remote's not going to go away. End of story. The fact that you can be doing these conferences and live events, it's a feature ad, in many scenarios. And we all know, if any of you that are out there working with the internet and you look at SEO, for instance, what performs well.
It's video, right?
It's video every time. You're talking at like 5 times the level of a normal, just basic, piece of text you put up on a web page.
There you go.
it's huge. So any of these environments, I think, are great, and it's across the board where we've looked at particular details that are going to be important to people. But I'm really proud of the work the guys have done. Whether it's the SRT for the security, whether it's working on live events with multiple pieces of equipment and syncing it up, as we saw with group control, right? And the fact now that you can do this at a budget point that's really appealing for, basic pieces where you can now get the graphics in and, as I mentioned, effectively have a built-in switcher type application. So it's really, really pretty helpful. And so just go over this again, you can clearly see this is giving you a lot more feature set than with the original product. So all the items we mentioned, graphics, group control, SRT, the amount of actual channels. And that's why we're calling it an advanced H.264 streaming recording device.
So thank you for that. We've heard a lot in a short time. So kicking off with the Bridge NDI 3G, taking NDI to a new group of customers, I think, and certainly taking it right up to the top of the broadcast chain, which is great. If NDI is not in your world right now, I don't think it will be far off. So you should take a look at that. Bridge Live, the Swiss Army knife encoder that fits everywhere. It's going from strength to strength, new software. It's got NDI on it now. It is the go-to encoder for both streaming and contribution. So I think that there's got to be a place for that in every rack, in every broadcast workflow. And finally, the Helo Plus. So many new features, a great box, a powerful box that fits, literally thousands of applications. So it's one that you need to spend some time looking at. So thank you, Bryce, again for coming. We really appreciate your time, and thank you all for your attention. We look forward to speaking to you soon. Take care.